I never thought the sky could look so angry. It was like the clouds were grieving for something we hadn't yet lost, but soon would. The wind howled outside my window, rattling the glass like it wanted in. My heart pounded in my chest as I tucked a blanket tighter around my 5-year-old daughter, Elsie. My son, 9-year-old Toby, tried to act brave, but I saw the fear in his eyes. He sat next to me on the floor of the living room, our backs pressed to the couch, the safest spot we could think of. The lights flickered and died, plunging us into darkness except for the faint beam of my phone's flashlight. I glanced at the screen. No service, no updates, just the echo of the emergency broadcast that had warned us to evacuate hours earlier, when it was already too late. "Mommy, is the house gonna fall?" Elsie whispered, her tiny fingers clutching my arm like a lifeline. "No, baby," I lied, brushing a strand of hair from her damp forehead. "We're gonna be just fine." But I didn't believe it. The walls shook. The wind roared louder than ever, and then, like a crack of thunder made flesh, the ceiling gave a groan and part of the roof tore off above the kitchen. Rain poured in like a burst dam, drenching the floor. I screamed and pulled my kids to me, crawling toward the hallway as debris started falling all around us. The next minutes were a blur of panic and prayer. I remember shielding my children with my body, my back aching from the weight of something heavy that struck me. A piece of the roof maybe, or a beam. But I didn't move. I couldn't. All I cared about was keeping them safe. I told myself over and over again, they can't lose me. They've already lost enough. When the storm finally passed, and the wind quieted to a mournful whistle, we were still huddled in the same spot, soaked and shivering. I looked around at what was left of our home, and there wasn't much. Walls crumbled, furniture crushed. The place I brought my babies home to, the place we built with love and late-night lullabies, was gone. But we were alive. I should have felt grateful. But all I felt was empty, homeless, broken. I called my parents first. I didn't know who else to turn to. I hadn't spoken to them in a while, but this was an emergency. I thought they'd understand. "Hi, Mom," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "It's me. The house, it's gone. We need a place to stay." There was silence on the other end. Then her voice, sharp, cold. "Where's Jason?" she asked, referring to my ex-husband. "We split up last year," I said. "It's just me and the kids." Another pause. Then came the words that still echo in my head. "Well, you made your choices, Lindsay. You always said you could do it on your own. You're not dragging those kids here to disrupt our peace." I couldn't breathe. I stared at the cracked wall in front of me, the phone still pressed to my ear. "But we have nowhere else to go." "You'll figure something out," she said. "You always do." Then she hung up. I sat there, holding the phone like it was a lifeline that had just been cut. My kids looked at me with hopeful eyes, waiting for the plan. Waiting for me to fix it. I forced a smile. "All right," I said, standing slowly, knees trembling beneath me. "Let's go figure it out." Because I had no choice. We spent that first night in my car. It wasn't much. A 12-year-old set in with more miles than memories, but it was all we had. I parked it in the far corner of a Walmart lot, behind a few trees, so we wouldn't draw attention. I laid the front seats back so the kids could lie across them, and I curled up in the back, hugging my knees to my chest, still wet from the storm, heart sore from the call with my mother. Elsie cried herself to sleep that night, her little voice fading into hiccups and silence. Toby didn't cry, but I could hear him breathing fast in the dark like he was holding it all in, pretending he was strong. Just like his father used to. I didn't sleep at all. At dawn, I cleaned them up with baby wipes and found an old box of granola bars in the glove compartment. That was breakfast. I had no idea what came next, no plan, no backup. Just a couple of crumpled 20s in my wallet and a maxed-out credit card. By noon, we were at the nearest shelter. It was a community center repurposed for storm survivors. Rows of cots, the smell of sweat and wet clothes hanging in the air, kids crying, adults staring blankly at walls like they'd lost pieces of themselves in the wind. Maybe they had. Maybe I had too. The volunteer at the check-in table gave me a tired smile. "Name?" she asked. "Lindsay Cole," I replied, shifting Elsie to my hip. She was too big to carry, but too shaken to walk. "Just you and the kids." I nodded. She handed me a clipboard. "Fill this out. We'll get you assigned to a cot." The form asked about next of kin, emergency contacts, insurance. I wrote N/A. So many times it felt like a confession. We were assigned 2 cots near the back. I let the kids have them. I sat on the floor, back against the wall, watching them pretend everything was okay. Toby pulled out his tattered comic book from his backpack. Elsie clutched her stuffed bunny, soaked, stained, and still her most treasured possession. It was the middle of the afternoon when I found the bathroom mirror and finally saw myself. My reflection looked like a stranger. Hair matted, cheeks hollow, eyes red. I looked like someone who'd survived a war. And in a way, I had. I tried calling my mother again later that day. She didn't pick up. I left a voicemail I regretted the second I finished it. "Mom, we're in a shelter. The kids are scared. Please. I just need a few nights until I can figure something out. Please call me back." She never did. That night, after the lights went out and the shelter quieted, I lay on the cold tile floor, staring up at the ceiling. I thought about Jason, my ex. About how he left after his gambling drained our savings, and I refused to take the fall for it. I thought about my job at the diner that was now underwater, just like our home. I thought about everything I used to believe in, family, love, safety, and how none of it had held when the storm hit. I wasn't just homeless. I was alone. But even in that moment, I made myself a promise. I would not let my children grow up believing this was all they deserved. Tomorrow, I would get up. I would find work, food, a way out. Because I was their mother. And that meant I had to be everything, even when I felt like nothing at all. The third morning in the shelter felt heavier than the last. The lights flickered as the old generator groaned back to life. I rubbed my eyes, feeling like I hadn't slept at all. Elsie had wet the cot during the night, stress, fear, all of it coming out in ways she didn't understand. I cleaned it as best I could while trying not to let anyone see. Toby sat quietly beside me, his arms wrapped around his knees. He hadn't spoken much since the storm. It was like something inside him had snapped shut, like a door I wasn't sure how to open again. Breakfast was donated pastries and instant coffee. The kids barely touched theirs. I forced mine down, not because I was hungry, but because I needed the caffeine to stay upright. My body was tired, but my mind couldn't afford to be. I spent the morning talking to a woman named Diane, a local volunteer who looked like she hadn't slept in days either. Her kindness was gentle but firm, the way I imagined a real mother might be. She asked if I had a place to go, any family nearby. I gave her the same answer I gave the form. No. "Well," she said, tucking a pen behind her ear, "we've got a short-term program for families. They can help you apply for housing assistance, maybe even find a part-time job. It's not perfect, but it's something." Something. It was more than I had yesterday. I followed Diane through the building to the back office, where a woman in glasses and a red vest introduced herself as Clara. She handed me more papers. So many papers. I filled them out with trembling hands while Elsie fell asleep in my lap and Toby drew pictures in the margins of a pamphlet. When we left that room, I didn't have a home yet, but I had a list of steps, tasks, a path, no matter how narrow or steep. Later that afternoon, as I helped clean up trays in the common area, trying to stay busy, stay useful, I noticed an older woman watching us from the hallway. She had soft gray curls and wore a blue cardigan with tiny embroidered flowers. She approached with a bag in her hand. "Excuse me," she said gently. "Your little girl. Elsie, right? I saw her earlier. She reminded me of my granddaughter." I tensed. I was still on edge around strangers, especially anyone asking about my kids. But then she reached into the bag and pulled out a small knitted blanket. Soft yellow with white daisies. Handmade. "I made this a while ago," she said. "I didn't know who it was for until I saw her." I stared at the blanket, my throat tightening. "I can't accept that." She smiled. "You can. And you will." Tears welled up before I could stop them. I took the blanket with shaking hands and whispered, "Thank you." That night, Elsie curled up in her cot with the new blanket wrapped around her like armor. She fell asleep faster than usual, her breathing soft and steady. I sat on the floor again, watching both of them. And for the first time since the hurricane hit, I let myself cry, not from fear or anger or shame, but from something dangerously close to hope. A blanket, a stranger's kindness, a tiny act that felt like a bridge from despair to possibility. We still had nothing, but maybe not everything was gone. Morning came with a chill, despite the warm air outside. The shelter's old HVAC system groaned under the pressure of too many people and too few resources. I sat on the edge of the cot, watching Toby eat a piece of toast without saying a word. Elsie played quietly nearby, wrapping and unwrapping her new blanket, humming a soft, tuneless melody to herself. She was adapting in her own way. Kids are like that. Resilient. But I knew, beneath her tiny smile and playful hands, she missed the life we had, even if it was never whole. I didn't miss that house. That broken place. But I missed the illusion that I once had control over our lives. Around mid-morning, Diane came to find me again. "There's a counselor here today, if you'd like to talk," she said gently. "Even just for a few minutes. It might help." "I'm fine," I replied, too quickly, too sharp. I wasn't fine, but the idea of spilling my life out to a stranger made my stomach turn. Diane didn't push. She just nodded and smiled. "Okay. I'll be around if you change your mind." Toby tugged at my sleeve after she left. "What's a counselor?" "Someone who listens," I said, brushing his messy hair out of his eyes. "Someone who helps people understand what they feel." "Do they help kids too?" That caught me off guard. "Yes, especially kids." He nodded solemnly, like he was considering it, then turned back to his drawing. I stared at his paper. He'd drawn our old house. The two-story brown one with the broken shutters. But this time the sky was black, and a jagged line split the house down the middle. My breath caught. "Toby, is that the hurricane?" He shook his head. "No, that was before the storm." I didn't ask more. I didn't need to. I knew what he meant. That house had been cracked long before the winds came. Later that day, I made myself walk down the hallway toward the counselor's room. The sign on the door said, "Maya Stevens, Crisis Support Volunteer." I knocked. "Come in." Maya was younger than I expected, maybe early 30s, with a warm face and kind eyes. Her office was quiet, with soft lighting and two chairs facing each other, not a desk in sight. I sat down, nervous. "I don't really do this kind of thing." "That's okay," she said, her voice calm and patient. "We can just sit. You don't have to talk if you don't want to." But after a minute the silence became unbearable. So I started. "I had a house, a job, a partner, and now I have nothing." Maya nodded, letting me speak. He wasn't always bad. There were good days, but most of the time, I felt like I was shrinking. Like if I just kept getting smaller, maybe he wouldn't get so angry. I hadn't planned to say that. But once it was out, I couldn't stop. I stayed because I thought it was better for the kids to have a roof, even if it came with yelling and silence, and control. But now we don't even have that. I don't know if I saved them or ruined them. Maya leaned forward. "You got them out. You protected them. That takes strength." I looked down at my hands. They were shaking. "I don't feel strong," I whispered. "You don't have to feel it to be it," she said. I left her room lighter than I'd entered. Not healed, not fixed, but cracked open in a new way. The kind that lets a little light in. That night I told Toby I'd spoken to the counselor. He nodded. "I think I want to talk to her too." I kissed his forehead. "Whenever you're ready." And for the first time in what felt like years, I believed we might actually find our way forward. The following days settled into a routine that felt almost alien in its simplicity. Wake up, help the kids get ready, wait in line for breakfast, then spend the day searching for resources, for jobs, for a future that didn't feel like a black hole. Toby and Elsie adjusted better than I expected. Maybe because, for the first time, they weren't walking on eggshells. There were no slammed doors, no icy glares across dinner, no whispered arguments when they were supposed to be asleep. Just quiet meals and soft voices. That in itself was healing. One morning, as I checked the bulletin board in the shelter's hallway, my eyes caught something that made my chest tighten. A list of names and a note. Mail pickup available for the following residents. And there it was. A. Jensen. My name. I hadn't expected mail. Who would write me? My parents had all but disowned me when I got pregnant with Toby. My sister hadn't spoken to me in 3 years, not since I missed her wedding, which coincided with one of Owen's "you're not going anywhere" weekends. Still, I walked up to the small desk and handed my ID to the volunteer. She smiled gently and handed me a single envelope. No return address. Just my name, in familiar handwriting. My heart nearly stopped. Owen. I didn't open it right away. I stood outside in the parking lot, envelope in hand, feeling it like it was a live grenade. Eventually, I sat on the curb, tore the edge with shaking fingers, and pulled the letter out. Anna. I hope this reaches you. I know what happened with the house. I know you're gone. I'm not surprised. Maybe I even expected it. I want you to know I'm not angry. I understand why you left. I was never good at showing how much I cared, but I did care. I still do. If the kids need anything, school clothes, medicine, a roof, I'll help. Just tell me where you are. You don't have to come back. I just want to help now. I owe you that much. Please write back. Owen. I stared at the paper, reading it again and again, hoping to catch a tone that wasn't written. Was he sincere? Was this guilt? A trap? A small part of me wanted to believe it. Not because I wanted him back, but because I wanted to believe he was capable of change. That all those years hadn't been for nothing. That I hadn't loved a ghost. But deep down, I knew better. He always said the right things after the damage was done. Always made promises in the aftermath, never during the storm. Still, I kept the letter. Not as a lifeline, but as a warning. When I told Maya about it during our next session, she asked gently, "Do you feel safe responding?" "No," I said without hesitation. "But I'm not scared anymore either. I just don't want him to have access to us." "That's good," she replied. "That's strength." Later that night, I found a small metal trash can behind the shelter and burned the letter. I watched the flames curl around his words, blackening each line until they disappeared into ash. It felt symbolic, necessary. Elsie came out behind me, hugging her teddy bear. "What are you doing, Mommy?" I looked down at the embers, just letting go of something that hurt me. She nodded as if she understood, and in her own quiet way, I think she did. We stood there together in the dark, the smoke rising like a whispered promise. We weren't going back. The days that followed the letter felt like I was walking on a tightrope. On one side was the ever-looming shadow of the past, the life I had tried to outrun. On the other, the small, fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, I could give my kids a better future. A future where we could feel safe, wanted, and loved. But the weight of that responsibility was crushing. Some nights, I could barely sleep, the sound of Toby's soft snoring from the other bed in the shared room the only comfort. How long could I keep pretending that I wasn't terrified? That the safety of the shelter was enough? I spent my days applying for every job I could find. Some were dead ends, others were promising but never followed up. Still, I pushed forward, each rejection only hardening my resolve. I couldn't fail them. Not again. Elsie, always perceptive, asked me one night while we were doing dishes, "Mom, do you ever miss Daddy?" Her question hit me like a slap in the face. "Sometimes," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "But not for the reasons you think." She paused, her little hand stilling in the water as she looked up at me. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I miss the good things. The parts of him that were kind, the parts I thought could change. But I don't miss the bad parts, Elsie. The things that made us scared." She nodded seriously. "I don't miss him either," she said softly. "But I miss our house." My heart twisted in my chest. I missed it too. The warmth of our home, the way the light would filter through the kitchen window in the mornings, the smell of freshly baked bread that used to fill the air. It wasn't the house that I missed, though. It was the idea of home. The illusion that we were a family, safe and whole. But home wasn't a place anymore. It was these quiet moments with my kids. The way they leaned on me, trusted me, even when the world felt like it was slipping away. That night, after the kids were asleep, I sat in the dark, my mind running through 1,000 thoughts. I had made it this far, hadn't I? I had gotten us out. I had burned the past, and though it still haunted me, it no longer controlled me. But the future? It felt like an endless horizon, too vast to navigate without a map. The next morning, a surprising knock on the door of the shelter jolted me from my thoughts. I opened it to find a woman in her mid-30s with a gentle smile, her hands full of bags. "Hi," she said, her voice warm but reserved. "I'm Tessa. I'm the director here, and I've heard a lot of good things about you." I blinked, caught off guard. "Good things? About me?" She nodded. "Yes. You've been very proactive, doing everything you can to move forward, to support your children. And we have some resources that might help you."